Hi, I'm Lauren, a mom, former teacher, turned children's book author, and your host who joins special guests each episode as we share our top kid-lit picks for sparking hard conversations the easy way. Yep, that means everything from tackling bullying and out-of-control anger to celebrating diversity, inclusion, and leading with kindness, plus so much more. My whole mission of my own children's book series, Blooming Rose, is to provide social and emotional support tools for in and out of the classroom, and this podcast is my way to expand that mission even further. So stay tuned as we dive into this week's topic on the Blooming Books podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Blooming Books podcast. Today, our guest is a board-certified and licensed behavior analyst alum from both Texas A&M and UT, who now has her own practice called Shine Behavior Services here in Katy, Texas, where she specializes in helping children and their families navigate autism journeys. Welcome to the show, Miss Anna Sturgeon, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Okay, so first, let's tell me a little bit about yourself, your family, and most importantly, whether you pull for A&M or UT on game days. I can't imagine that.
Oh, goodness. Well, that's an easy one. A&M all the way.
Okay.
I went to UT Dallas, so it's a little different than UT in Austin. Mm-hmm. But regardless, I had no affinity for UT. A&M only. So I bleed maroon. But I am married to my husband, Aaron. We've been married for 10 years this May. We have two wonderful kids, Cole and Peyton, who are 8 and 5. So we are entering our first year of having them both in elementary school. So it's a whole new phase of life.
Yeah, I was about to say, I didn't realize that because my daughter's 9 and my son is 5 too. Yeah. So are they just starting kindergarten?
Yeah, it's crazy.
I know. I don't know what to do with myself. You know, when I drop them off at the same time, pick them up at the same time.
From the same place.
5 full days a week.
Great.
I'm like, okay.
I know.
But, it's kind of sad, though.
It is.
Right?
It's very bittersweet, especially when it's your last baby going into school. But fortunately, she's been so excited, and that's been great.
Before we know it, they'll be going off to A&M.
Oh, don't say that.
Right?
Well, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
I know. My husband and I are LSU alums.
Okay.
But now that we're Texas natives, and, you know, that in-state tuition is looking pretty
absolutely
beneficial.
Absolutely.
So A&M all the way. Okay, let's get into some silly and random rapid-fire questions just to get to know you a little more. Okay. So number 1, are you the neat freak or the hot mess in your relationship? Because I say they always marry each other. There's always one of each.
Well, my husband got really lucky because he got both.
I'm
quite literally split down the middle.
Mm-hmm.
I always have this kind of like Jekyll and Hyde personality when it comes to like, I'll get this burst of, we're cleaning out everything, we're purging everything, and then a week later, it's like, I'm just hoarding stuff and making a cluttered mess when I get a new idea or a project or something. I can tend to bounce around between things before finishing it all the way, so I'm a little bit of both, but I would say I'm more on the neat freak side than my husband.
I mean, and I know as, you know, a behavior analyst, I'm sure you know the benefits, right? Of like having it being
very
clean
aware.
and organized. So you're like, okay, let's wrangle in this chaos.
I get in my own head all the time. I'm like, I know exactly what I should do and how to do it, but sometimes I just don't want to.
Sometimes you get tired, you lose steam.
Yes.
Okay, number 2, if you were to write a book, what topic and genre would it be?
I always have wanted to write a book. Mm-hmm. Even when I was a kid, I told everyone I wanted to be an author. And so I think I would love to do some sort of parenting guide, but just something that's really simple and applicable and realistic. Just kind of tips and tricks on how to navigate different journeys within parenthood, especially in regards to special needs parenting and things like that. And then I would also love to do some like a children's book. My son is obsessed with comic books and writing comic books. He wants to be an animator. So it's something fun we kind of do together. We'll come up with different stories. And he was just asking me yesterday, how do you publish a book? And I was like, you know what? We need to find out and we need to do it together. Like, I think that would be so fun to do something kind of based off of his ideas and kind of help.
Well, let me know.
I know. So I've got to tell him.
Our illustrator, Kristen Humphrey, she graduated from A&M's. And I guess it's, I'm drawing a blank on what they call it now, but their visual arts program.
Yeah.
So she has animation and illustration degree.
I need to get
A&M.
I need to get him hooked up with her because that is our passion right now.
All right, number 3, what is a fun hobby or talent you have or you would like to have?
One that is in the works, I would say, is cooking. For the longest time, I just did not really cook much, or I just cooked very limited options. And I feel like in the last year or two, I've been trying really hard to get more creative with cooking, try new recipes, baking different things. Because I just felt like I didn't really have a lot of dishes that were like mine that people want to, and of course kids make it hard because I don't like that, it looks different, or whatever it may be, but that is something that I have started to find a lot of enjoyment from. It's taking the time to cook.
That's funny because my husband and I met at a restaurant at LSU. Quick story. He was working in the kitchen, I was working up front, and so he was like, it's not a chef, he was a cook, but he liked to experiment in the kitchen and do things. And he would, now that we're married and we have kids and all the things, like he calls it the blue collar meals. I have to do the blue collar meals during the week. Yes. The ones where, especially now, I don't have a kitchen, because they're renovating the kitchen. So I'm trying to piece together all these HEB things. And, but he does what he calls the glory meals, like on the weekend, where he takes 5 and 6 hours to like chop up everything, use every dish in the kitchen, and like make a huge thing of like pastelaia or chili, like or something real like meal. But yeah, so we just turned 40. Both of us just turned 40 this year, and he read an article at the beginning of the year, which is when his birthday was, about things you should be adulting as a 40-year-old, and one of them was about cooking. So he's like, I need to get my 5 signature meals. I'm like, go for it. I'm all, as long as you do the dishes too.
Exactly.
Okay, so now we're going to switch gears and dive into this week's topic. You and I originally met at a Katie Women in Business coffee meetup, and somehow started chatting about our world of social media and how it's affecting our children. I wish I would have had my podcast equipment there, because it's one of those topics that once you start digging into and chatting about, you could have been there for hours. But I also just think it resonates with a lot of parents today who are facing decisions about screen time, about limiting smartphone use, for our 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds that are asking us for cell phones already, how it affects their kids' mental health and all the things. And then, of course, everything seeps into the culture and atmosphere, into their classrooms as well. So we'll stick to social media in particular, but as a childhood behavior analyst, what is your first top-of-mind reaction when you think of how social media is shaping our kiddos today, and at what age do you really see it start to affect them?
So from a behavioral standpoint, I think social media and screen use in general, it affects children's language and the way it develops, and it can be both a tool and it can be really harmful. And so I think we have to find that balance, and that can be really tricky. Another big thing I see is kind of the outlook on different experiences and life. It's almost this false sense of experience when you're watching things on social media, and you feel like you've been somewhere or you've done something that you haven't actually done. You've just seen someone else do it, or you've seen a video of an interpretation of it,
or you watch a YouTube
watch a YouTube of it, and and you think like, oh, okay, so then I can do that. A personal experience for me is that my daughter really liked this one show. It was like a family show, and I watched a few episodes with her, and I was like, okay, like, it seems harmless or whatever. But then one of the big shticks that they would do are these like pranking videos, which, okay, like, some of that can be funny, but then it was so like over the top that she started thinking, oh, we can do that here too. And so she was doing these like, or attempting to do, these kind of ridiculous pranks that it was just like, that's not real life. Like, that was just for a show. And I just don't think their brains are able to process that and develop how much like that isn't realistic and isn't going to be how the real world works. But our mindset, our outlook, our language development, all those things determine our behavior. And that can come out as being more aggressive, being more impatient, lacking impulse control. I know the transition between screen time and non-screen time is usually the time that parents see the most outbursts and the most, when you're either denying the screen or removing it after having it for a while. And so that becomes really punishing for the parent. And then the parent is like, well, I want to avoid that tantrum. So, okay, keep having it, or let me offer it to you again. And we're just lacking those real world connections and teaching our kids how to be without something that they really want, and how to tolerate being in different social environments. It's a very avoidant behavior to use a screen over and over again.
I think that's one of the biggest parenting hurdles is that giving in to, I mean, they get persistent, and they get,
for sure,
very convincing, and whether it's, screen time or a lollipop at the grocery store or whatever it is they want, you're tired, you're impatient, you're in a hurry, you're trying to get all these things done, and you finally give into it. And it's like something that we maybe need to just step back and say, okay, do we really want, what are the boundaries for our
what's
family?
the long-term goal here? And I know for us as adults, I mean, we've only had social media in our lives since being adults, right? And it's still extremely addicting for our brains. And
mental health, I mean, with adults is...
And I am 100% guilty of the doom scroll or the, mindless scrolling. And that's something that I've had to really take a step back on and evaluate, especially more recently, of just like, how much time am I? And we were kind of talking about this before we started, but even just when you're starting a business or kind of getting out on your own, social media is a wonderful tool for that. Yes. But then it can lead to just this constant feeling of, I need to be on, or I need to be checking, or I need to be putting stuff out. And so then, you put that kind of almost truly addictive feeling in the hands of a 4, 5, 6, 10-year-old, whatever. Their brains are just not developed enough to even understand what they're doing, and how addictive it is, and to make the choice to say, oh, I shouldn't be spending this much time doing this. And social media in particular, TikTok, Instagram, Reels, all those things.
Well, Snapchat too.
Snapchat,
if it disappears, that is a big
and they
red
know
flag.
what they're doing when it comes to the length of the videos. It's science. It releases that dopamine surge every time you swipe and get a new video. And it's this, kind of variable reinforcement of, is this going to be something I like? Who knows? Maybe. And it increases your desire to keep on scrolling, because maybe the next thing I see will be something that I really find interest in, or something that I'm really going to enjoy. But also, it's the other way. The next thing I scroll could be something really horrific, or really depressing, or something that causes me to really stumble in my own feelings towards myself, whatever it may be. And kids just can't
They're
process
not ready.
that. They're not.
That's how I try to explain it to my daughter, because she's 9, she's in 4th grade, and it is real at this point. And she's like, Mom, can I have my own YouTube channel? I'm like, no. But I have to explain it to her in terms of, I wouldn't just go to the grocery store and like let you just jump out at the grocery store and go muddle around by yourself and just like check in with you like in an hour, you know? And being online is that kind of public space, but in a digital form. Yeah. And I, try to explain to her, I'm like, I know you're not going to, enjoy some of my decisions or agree with me, but for me, it is, trying to keep you safe and trying to keep you, not under the influence of what I can control, but to a certain extent, social media is so influential, and they just can't see it when they're that young. Oh, I'm being influenced. I'm being persuaded to do this or think this or, do that. And who knows what they're being influenced by.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right. So I know I'm old school and not cool anymore, but I just think back to growing up without social media, really being that last generation to do so, and the social anxieties I experienced as a timid kid, and think, gosh, now how do these kids ever get out in the real world and practice these skills if they grow up online instead of outside in the real world? It's so much easier to retreat than face your fears, and now I feel like it's probably more than, easier than ever. So do you think our kids' behavior, like how they get along with peers, the societal pressures and comparisons, or even interacting with adults, is being affected by their more limited development now that they're chatting online or behind a screen instead of interacting in person? And what kinds of issues are you seeing with like the in-person socialization skills that are lacking now?
Absolutely. I mean, I think we're even seeing that shift with adults where, it's like you can be having a conversation with someone and they are just inadvertently looking down at their phone and checking things. And that kind of social decorum has changed a lot over the years. And I'm very much I've been guilty of it before. And when I started really keying in on that, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm not giving my full attention to who I'm with in this moment. And it's very much the same with kids. I do see this kind of social rallying around like social media and video games, and now like playing with a friend is sitting next to them watching the same screen, playing a game, And while there can be some social components to that, and it can be a fun outlet, if that's all you're doing, you're not doing anything, you're not creating anything with anybody, you're not having those, conversations about just all the random things that can come up in your day-to-day life. I definitely see where kids just aren't being given the same amount of opportunities.
Right.
And with behavior, we always look for increasing opportunities. Whatever you're trying to teach, no matter what it is, you have to have more opportunity to do it in order to learn it. That's how our brains work. And so if the opportunities are limited because you're spending so much time looking at a screen or not out there with other kids or with other adults, then the likelihood of learning those skills and those social skills, social expectations, just manners, appropriate behaviors, all that kind of stuff is just automatically decreasing because you're just not given the opportunities. And unfortunately, with decreased opportunities, then the few opportunities you have, if they're in any way a punishing experience, which they probably will be in some ways, you're maybe being too loud or you're not getting along with someone or whatever it may be, then the likelihood that you're going to do it again goes down, right? So if it's a bad social experience, just like you were kind of saying, when you have like an anxious feeling, or if you're timid and you put yourself out there and it doesn't go well, you're not immediately retreat. And and then you're able to retreat into this, again, kind of false experience of a social media world, and you feel like you're being social, you feel like you're connected, but you're not.
You're not, or they feel like they know these people, and she's getting to the age where she's watching these shows on Disney and knowing the actors and all this stuff. I'm like, okay, you don't actually I'm sure they're very them. Nice people, but you don't know what they are like in real life,
right? And I think that's true. Even I think about, for us, our generation, Facebook came out. I'm aging myself here, but came out, when we were in college.
Yes, I was going to say college.
So, so that was such a brand new thing. And even now, as we're preparing for our 20-year high school reunion, it's like, I actually know what most people are somewhat up to, but I haven't talked to them in 20 years. But the fact that I know how many kids they have, where they live, what their jobs are, it's such a strange way of keeping people at arm's distance, because it's like, I don't have to actually talk to you to know these things. Right. Whereas before, it's like you would have to actively develop those relationships in order to get that information.
It's nice. It's kind of like a double-edged sword, I find. Maybe for me, because I like keeping up with them.
Sure.
And especially as a business owner, I like connecting with so many businesses and things like that. And so of course social media has a lot of positive effects too, but for adults. But then on the other hand, I might be friends with somebody from high school on Facebook still, but if I see them in the grocery store, I'm turning the other way.
I'm doing a U-turn.
I'm so awkward that I don't want to actually interact in the real world. Yeah. And that's kind of the things too I'm trying to teach my kids is okay, make, when you're checking out, or, I'll have them order for themselves, or I'll have them hey, here's some money, go, check out and buy something, and make sure you make eye contact. Make sure you say, please and thank you, or, ask them how their day is, all those kinds of things that,
are kind of lost in the shuffle.
Especially now we can online order everything, and everything just gets shipped to your door, and you can literally don't have to talk to anybody people ever.
For sure. Well, and I know with the community that I focus my practice in is the autistic community, and that's a whole kind of different nuance when it comes to social media and screen time, because it can be a really amazing tool for regulation, for communication, for learning different skills, for kind of gaining those experiences, watching things play out can be really helpful for preparing for social experiences for my clients and things like that. So it can be a wonderful tool. And even just the social media part of it may not be as influential as more, the YouTube or kind of getting to watch your preferred show or video over and over again. But again, if you're not having the ability to have tons of practice doing new behaviors, trying new skills, trying new social interactions, and we're only focusing on keeping them calm and regulated all day long, you're just losing so many opportunities.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that I work on with families a lot is like, use it as a tool, because it is a tool. And I would never tell a family of any child, like, cut out all screens.
Yeah.
You know, they're all toxic. It's all bad. Because I don't believe that. I believe that they are a tool and that we live in an age where we have some awesome things at our fingertips and we should be able to use those. But there is a fine line between using it as a tool and using it as a crutch, or using it as a pacifier, or really doing more harm than good because we maybe lack the education of knowing what else to do, or we're scared to try something new. I find that a lot with families where it's like from the age of 1, their child's had a screen. They've had access to a screen, whether it be a phone or a tablet or whatever. And so then by age 3, 4, 5, we're seeing like, oh, they're having a really hard time anytime I try and take it away. And it's like you're having to now kind of backtrack and reteach that toleration of removal. And that's a really hard thing to do, because no parent wants to see their kid having a hard time.
No.
And so, you know, I find that if we can get the education out there now, before those habits are built, even on the parenting side of things, because it's a habit for us too, that if you start to get loud in a
what
public,
we're modeling for them,
for sure,
you know,
and we have to practice what we preach, and that's something that I've really felt convicted of in the last few months. I actually just got off of a 40-day social media detox. I did that this summer, and you know, I took off my personal Instagram, took off TikTok, Facebook, all those things from my phone. And it was amazing how I kept looking for it. Like my thumb would just kind of
it's
scroll
like
and look
automatic. You don't even
automatic.
think.
And I had no desire to look at it, but it was just like, oh, I'm somehow searching for things. And how my brain also kind of looked to other things to fill that gap. I found myself like almost searching out other things to scroll. All of a sudden I'm on LinkedIn looking at things that like I never looked at, but why? But it's like your brain keeps looking for that. And so I found that was so helpful, even just in talking to my kids about it. I'm not going to look at my phone tonight. I'm going to put it over here. Let's all put our stuff over here, tablets and everything. And for them to get to see that and experience me putting things away. Because our kids see us with our phones connected to our arms.
And especially like with businesses, like I jump on so many times. I don't usually stay on there very long, but I jump on all the time. Or I'll find myself, I'm watching a show and like it hits a commercial, like I immediately pick up my phone. I'm like, why can't I just sit still for a minute? Like we can't.
No, it's very hard.
You know, we were sitting down at the table yesterday, actually, and my 5-year-old, my husband and my daughter were, you know, our schedules are out of whack right now because the kitchen, like the renovation, you know, and like we've got little pockets of our house that we're hanging out in. It was just me and my son. And we were about to sit down together, and I had my phone out, and he had his tablet. And he's like, "You know what, Mom? Why don't we have some mommy OE time?" And we put it away. I'm like, "Oh shoot, you're right."
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like absolutely.
And
you
kids
know,
call you out. I know my daughter does the same thing. If we have family movie night, she'll be like, "It's a movie theater rules. No phones.
Yeah.
No phones allowed."
Like you're not paying attention to the movie,
and you're not watching it. And it's like, well, I've watched this movie 25 times.
Yes.
But you know, from their perspective, it's like I'm excited to do this with you, and you're not here with me.
Yeah.
And so that's been a huge shift for us. I feel like over this summer, and it's a continual thing. But you know, I think just truly seeing social media, seeing screens in general as what they were meant to be, which was a tool to make our certain parts of our lives easier, and just using it that way can make such a difference.
Yeah, because I mean, I do want to add that social media can be used for good, of course, and it is a place where a lot of genuine connections, inspiration, and support is shared. But like any other area of our life, especially such a public one, it can be used in dangerous and toxic ways. And as children, they're of course more vulnerable to that. So like all parenting topics and decisions, this chat is just for shedding a light on our own thoughts. And of course, we all strive to make the best choices for our own families. And, you know, who's perfect with anything?
Absolutely not me.
But I do love that your practice focuses on the family as a whole and not just isolated to treating, you know, one child. But it really takes a family effort to raise independent and critical thinking people. What is one thing you would advise parents, even with kids as young as preschool, to focus on habit-wise so that they're incorporating real-life skills and experiences, real-life expectations to kind of combat these deeper issues later on?
Yeah, I think that setting limits is the number one thing that needs to happen. And it's not just limits as far as like, oh, there's a set amount of time it has to be, or a set time of the day it has to be. I think that varies with families across the board with the needs of their children, especially if you have any kind of additional support needs where you need more access to a screen for communication or for regulation. But I think just, again, increasing the opportunities of practicing putting it away, practicing introducing it. Okay, we're going to have our 30 minutes of screen time, and then when that timer goes off, we're going to move on to another activity. And one of the other things that I see so often, so we use the term repertoire of reinforcers. So when we're doing assessments for kids, especially with autism and other developmental delays, we're looking at, okay, do they have a strong community of reinforcers? Like, do you have multiple things that you find interest in that are motivating, that we can use to help increase appropriate behaviors or skills that we're teaching, whatever it may be?
Not just one.
Not just one. Yeah. And sometimes the reality is the screens are the strongest always, for no matter what kid you're working with. If a screen is involved, that's going to be probably what they pick. And so if everything else is really limited, that can make teaching new skills really hard, and teaching the toleration of removal really hard, because if you're taking away the one thing I love and there's nothing else that can compete with that, that's really tough. And so I think one of the pieces that has to be worked on that sometimes we forget about is, yes, we need to lessen screen time, but that means we need to increase other experiences. Yeah. We need to increase other access to other games, outdoor activities, sensory play, whatever it may be that does not include a screen, to make those really fun. And that usually is going to mean you doing it with your kids and making it more of a social activity, bringing in other, families or other kids, other preferred people, not just saying like, go play. While independent play, I think, is also extremely important. That's kind of a topic for another day, but really making sure that they're having access to lots of other reinforcing activities, so that losing the screen, losing that for, the rest of the day doesn't feel like the end of the world.
Right. And then they're just so bored that they drive you crazy too.
Yeah.
But I was just going to say, when you're talking about that, I'm thinking, okay, the only other incentive that's like really high on their list, and it's kind of sad to say, is spending time with their parent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I mean, it's hard to say for me as a mom, of course, because we always have other things going on in the back of our head, oh, I'm trying to do this right now, or I'm trying to get this done, I'm trying to, work, or, something like that. But, the more we can pull out ourselves and spend that time with them, they're going to thrive off of that.
Absolutely. Well, and you're giving them more activities and more things that they find reinforcing enough to then do on their own.
Right.
But we have to teach and show them first, and then kind of give them the flexibility to go and do it independently or with their sibling or with other friends. But just increasing those opportunities, I think, is the number one thing. And and also to not necessarily, and this is, again, much easier said than done, don't be scared of the fallout that might come from implementing this. It's never going to be a smooth transition, and it's always going to have growing pains, and it's always going to, but I think when you're thinking long-term goals, in the long term, do I want them to be able to tolerate a transition away from something? Yes. So that might mean having this big tantrum and this big fallout. And again, with our, neurodivergent families, that can be a definitely a different situation. Yeah. And so anytime I'm working with a family where screen time is a huge trigger, or something that can cause some really intense behaviors that could potentially be dangerous, we have to really approach that very carefully and systematically. And so again, that's why I would never encourage somebody to cut it out, take it away,
just up and,
no matter what.
Rip it from your hands,
there's very systematic ways that we can do that, but one of the number one things is just increasing the fun of other things. If you're over here playing and having fun and doing something engaging, that tablet might not look quite as exciting.
Be like, okay, well, you got a few more minutes, but I'm going to go ahead and start this.
Yeah.
And you just have a ball over
Yeah.
here,
And
I've with Play-Doh or whatever.
I've done that before.
And they're like, okay, I'm coming.
Yeah, it's like, oh, I'm going to go outside and I'm going to, do some bubbles or do whatever. And it's like, well, okay, I want to come.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just making other experiences available, fun, engaging, social, that can make a huge difference.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, let's talk about our book picks, because books really are a magical way to relate kids to a concrete character that they can see and feel react in situations that might be similar to what they're experiencing, knowing they're not alone in feeling a certain type of way, and that's so valuable in my opinion, hence the whole podcast. But can you tell us a little bit about the book that you chose that kind of goes along with this topic?
Yeah, so I chose Polly and the Screen Time Overload
by
Betsy Childs Howard.
Okay.
And it basically tells the story of Polly, and she's at her grandparents' farm, and she chooses to spend all of her time on her screen rather than experiencing the farm, the animals, all the experiences that come on a farm. And so the way they I loved the tagline they put, screens keep kids away from better things. So it's not that it's bad. The screen isn't bad, but it's keeping you away from better things.
Or what are you missing?
Yeah. And so that's what, so she learns the lesson of, you're in here doing this, but here's all the things you missed out on. And so kind of showing that there's more fun to be had outside and, doing these other experiences. And there's a time for screens, but not all day.
Yeah.
Not when you're missing out on all of this.
Yeah.
It's really good for ages 3 to 7. It's a really kind of simple but engaging book that kind of helps explain that. And it also, I found this out, comes with a free download of 44 activities that don't involve screens for parents.
Wow.
So for parent application to give you, because I know for me, sometimes I'm like, I've run out of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
We've done everything I can think of. And so just having that as kids are, for the most part, very simple. It doesn't have to be this big complicated activity, but sometimes it's hard to think of them. So I loved that it included that as well.
I'm all about extra beyond the text activities.
Yes.
I love that. So the book I chose is called The Power in Words by Meaghan and Axel. It touches on a lot of familiar scenarios where children need to be mindful of the impactful, hurtful words that they can have on others. But there's one scenario in particular that focuses on how we speak to each other online. So it is a crazy world we live in, and I hate that some adults are using keyboards to mask their vitriol comments. I mean, it's just so unnecessary. And our kids are watching this, and they're always watching. So we can do better, and this is a great book. I actually sent it to school with my daughter one year. I think it was like second grade. She was having some spats with, friends and stuff. And I said, here, won't you ask your teacher to go read this book?
I love that.
I also like the book called A Smart Girl's Guide, Digital World, How to Connect, Share, Play, and Keep Yourself Safe. It's from the American Girl series, which I didn't even realize they had a book series.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess I'm thinking about the other girl series, but the American Girls have actual stories about each girl. I mean, again, we were so old back then. I'm trying to remember. But they have new books out now. It's called A Smart Girl's Guide, and it has a bunch of different topics. But this one is aimed for preteen girls, and it's a deeper dive across all digital platforms, and even touches on taking on trolls and when to keep scrolling. So I love that it's kind of like a nice little overview for girls that are venturing into that.
And from a parenting perspective, I don't know I'm sure you've heard of it, because I feel like it kind of blew up, but The Anxious Generation, have you heard of that book?
Yes.
By Jonathan Haidt. I'm going to say it wrong. But it's a #1 bestseller now, and it talks a lot about mental health struggles that our kids' generations are facing that we didn't necessarily face at the rates and intensity that they're facing, tied to social media specifically.
I mean, the comparison, you used to compare yourselves to, 5 other girls in your class, and now you're comparing to like 500 girls across the country.
Right, and it's fake. It's that false reality of it's a highlight reel, but kids don't necessarily understand that.
Adults don't understand.
I know, for sure. I don't either sometimes. I'm like, oh, look at these amazing vacations that are going on, not knowing that maybe there's a huge pile of debt behind that. Or
there's a credit card swipe.
And just kind of finding peace within your own actual world can be really difficult. And the news can be so overwhelming.
Yes.
And I fully believe that as human beings, we were not meant to know everything that's going on at all times. And
it's a lot.
It's a lot. And teaching our kids that is really important, that like, it's okay if you miss out on knowing something because you're not
FOMO.
meant to know. FOMO. It's a real thing, but it's worth saving your mental health and not knowing all the things.
Yeah. So with most episodes, I'll be creating a resource that parents and teachers can use to spark conversations with their kids in addition to the books. For this topic, I've created a fun outdoor scavenger hunt because what better way to encourage putting down the screens and spending time in the real world than making a game out of it? So you can find the link to that on our Teachers Pay Teachers page and in the show notes. I mean, just like we said, like at the farm, there's so much stuff to do.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Get out and see the world, please, the real world. Okay, so before we go, let's take a minute to share our hashtag mom win or hashtag therapist win of the week, because none of us are perfect, right? Not even therapists.
Oh,
please tell us.
Absolutely
No?
not.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
So let's celebrate what went right. Guess usually hate when I ask this question because it really forces us to brag on ourselves, which we're usually uncomfortable with. But I think it's important to note that for ourselves and model it for others, other listeners that are in a similar boat. So do you have a win of the week that you would like to share? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Well, I have to say, I think my win of the week so far, I mean, it's only Monday, so the week is young, but...
Okay, maybe last week.
But even just being on my first podcast, I feel like this is a win. It's really exciting to, like, meet so many like-minded people and get to talk about topics that are so interesting. And I was very nervous, but this went great. It was really fun. So that was a win. And then I think on a personal note, just having my kids have a smooth transition into school was a big win. You know, you never know how it's going to go and how that transition's going to be, but...
especially kindergarten.
And especially kindergarten. Oh, my daughter didn't even look back when I dropped her off. I mean, I was the emotional one and she was just bye, which... you know, it's still, it's a win. It's a win. It's a good thing. It's a hard thing, but it's a good thing. So that was definitely a win.
For sure. And just to kind of pull back to like the podcast thing and talking about people, and it's, you know, even having this business and like we talked about a little bit before, being the face and the putting ourselves out there as business owners to get your business, you know, out there. You're forced in these social situations, and we're used to. I can sit here on Instagram all day long and you know do stupid reels and you know do all kinds of stuff, but like it's so intimidating meeting people in real life. But I feel like we have so much to connect on. You know, especially like you know the Katie Women in Business. Like it's just a like-minded group of women-owned businesses, and we get together and we start talking about all the things. And you just like it just always leaves me so you know feeling so heartwarmed to
well,
to
and again, it's like that. I still remember the first time I went to Katie Women in Business, any kind of networking event, especially at the very beginning of starting Shine. It was like, I don't belong here. What am I going to say? This is so awkward. I had never done anything like it before. But the more you go, the more it becomes so comfortable and fun, and really reinforcing just to go, because I get to see friends now, and that kind of plays into that why repetition is so important. And if you allow fear to stop you, or you know social anxiety, things like that, you could potentially miss out on so much.
It's true. It's really true. And that's kind of scary thinking about us as you know people that you know social media, like you said, came in our college years versus these kids now. This is just all they've known. It's going to be that much harder when they get to be adults in the real world and, you know, getting out there. Absolutely. Some of them, of course, are more socially, you know, outgoing than others, but a lot of us are, you know, introverts at heart. Or a little timid at heart. A little bit of social anxiety at heart, you know, all the things. So, I did want to add too, real quick. Did you see that they're doing a new Toy Story movie?
I did not, but I read that when you sent it, and I'm very excited.
The nemesis, you know, in every story, you know, there's some kind of, you know, conflict, of course, but in this time it's still electronics. So I'm really curious to see how that plays out. You know, and I also absolutely loved Inside Out 1 and 2 as a therapist. Do you just love those movies?
Oh, my gosh.
Is it just me?
No. No, my kids love them, and it's been such a good tool to talk about things, you know, in a way that's understandable. And even for adults who watch it, I mean, we have conversations where it's like, that never made sense to me until I saw it in that, you know, colorful,
like, this is
animated
why my
way.
anxiety plays out how it does.
And you know, to be able to see that emotions, there's no good or bad, they just all serve a purpose. And that's opened up some really cool conversations for me and my kids.
Yeah, same.
For sure.
So Inside Out 1, if you haven't seen it, is definitely geared towards just identifying your emotions. So
Yeah.
I would say like the younger kiddos,
Yeah.
like, kinder,
kind of the basic
primary.
emotions.
And then Inside Out 2 is ramped up to all things for puberty.
Preteen,
so
puberty.
get ready.
All the things.
Well, this has been so fun. Thank you again for joining me here on
Thank
season 2 of our little podcast. Where can listeners connect with you and learn more about your services?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at shine_behavior. Or I have a website, www.shinebehaviorservices.com. I offer free 15-minute consultations. So for any family that's looking for, support with autism, their autism journey, diagnosis support, anything like that, I would love to help.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
Not to be ironic, but go find us on social media.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah. The irony's not lost.
Yes.
On us.
I mean, adults only.
Yeah.
Well, still. Okay. So I think that's it for this week's episode. Thank you again for joining me, and thank you guys for listening. I hope you've gained a couple of helpful nuggets for guiding your kids or students through the crazy world of social media. And we'll see you guys next time on the Blooming Books podcast. So bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Blooming Books podcast, recorded and produced by Blooming Rose Kids. We've opted to keep our series ad-free, and if you'd like to support our efforts, please consider shopping our own custom-signed Blooming Rose books at bloomingrosekids.com and our academic materials on our Teachers Pay Teachers page. All of the books mentioned in this episode are also available via our affiliate links in the show notes. We so appreciate you being here and hope to see you next time.